In this screencast, we're going to be talking about Marionette.js, which is an extension to Backbone.js. You can find it at marionette.js.com. Basically, Marionette.js is a bunch of application architecture that's built on top of Backbone to make your job of making more complex Backbone applications a whole lot easier. It's similar in some respects to the layout manager that was bundled with the Backbone boilerplate grunt plugin. However, I like Marionette.js a little bit better than I do the layout manager, and we'll see how it works in this screencast. So I have our bare bones Express project over here on the side, and as you can see in the public file here, I've downloaded backbone.marionette.min.js. You can get that right now if you head over to the Marionette.js GitHub page, choose the Marionette.js repository, and then go into the library file here, and right here, backbone.marionette.min.js. So we'll go ahead and close that right now. And let's pop open our terminal and get to work. Let's first take a look at our index.jade file. As you recall, this is our server-side template that will render our index.html page. As you can see, we have two elements here at the top. One will be a div with an ID of form, and one is a div with an ID of list. Then we have several script tags here. They all have a type of text/template, and these are the templates that we're going to be using for this example. I've pre-written them just so you don't have to watch me type some plain old HTML. But as you can see here, we have basically a form for creating a new user. We have a view that will show us the user's name and age. And then we have two headings here. One just says users and the other says no users. Finally, at the bottom here, we have our script tags, jQuery_backbone, and then notice just after backbone, we have a script tag for Backbone Marionette. Remember that Backbone Marionette is built off of Backbone, so of course you'll want to put that script tag after the Backbone script tag. And finally, we have our app.js file, so let's go ahead and open that up and see what we can do with Marionette.js. The first thing we're going to do is create a new application. We're just going to call our application user tracker here. And what we're going to do is create a new backbone.marionette.application. This is an instance of an application. You'll see later on how we use this application to organize some of the content on our page. But right now, let's get into the actual content that we want to create. Let me paste in a user model and a users collection. These are just the normal bare bones model and collection that we've been using all the way along. So now, let's go ahead and create a user view. Normally, when we would create a user view, we would want to extend backbone.view, right? However, in this case, we're going to extend backbone.marionette.itemView. Now, the idea behind the Backbone Marionette item view is that when you're rendering a view for a single model, there's one really common scenario, and that is you're grabbing your template from a script tag in your HTML, and then you're just converting that to a template function, and then passing the attributes of your model to that function. So if that's exactly what you need to do, then you can just use the Backbone Marionette item view to automate that for you. All we have to do is pass it as a template, a CSS selector that will grab the script tag that has our template code in it. So in our case, that's user view. That's really our whole item view template. If you think about it, you can see how we'll be using the render method from the Marionette item view to get the content of that template, convert it to a function, and then call model.toJSON and pass that into the template. Since this is what we do in 90% of the cases, we can let Backbone Marionette do the work for us. So now we can go ahead and create a user's view. Again, this would normally just be a Backbone view, but since we're using Marionette, we can create a backbone.marionette.collection view. Now, the use case that the collection view covers is just rendering a bunch of models. That is, getting our item view and rendering it and then appending it and rendering the next one and appending it to our element. So since that's all our collection view has to do, all we have to do is give it an item view property, and we're going to set this item view to user view. This tells it exactly what view we want to use for each one of the models inside of that collection. But then let's use a second property here, and this is the empty view. What happens if our collection has no models? Well, let's set this to no user view, and then we're going to have to go ahead and create this class up here. We'll call it no user view. This will be a Marionette item view, and I happen to have a template called no users view, and perhaps that would be more semantic to call it no users. And so there we have an empty view. Now, when our Backbone collection has no items in it, it will render the no users view, but once it gets an item, it will render our item view instead. Okay, now let's create a form view, because we're going to want a form that will allow us to add users to our users collection. So we are going to make this a Marionette item view. And you might think this would be weird because it's not really going to have a model associated with it. However, using the item view class is just handy because we just have to give it a template with an ID string, and we don't have to worry about creating that template function or writing a render function ourselves. So even though we aren't really rendering an item, it does save us a bit of time. This is going to be the form view element, and we're going to want to have an event here. So let's add our events object, and we'll say when the button element is clicked, we want to run the create new user function. So after the event object here, we'll have the create new user function. And inside of this function, we need to refer to two elements that are in our form. If we go back here to index.jade, you can see we have an input with an ID of name and an input with an ID of age. We're going to need to refer to each of those twice, once to get its value and then once to reset its value to nothing. Now you might think we would want to create local variables here in create user to reference these. However, there's actually a better way to do it. With our item view here from Marionette, we can add another property here that's called UI. This is going to be an object. And the way this works is really simple. We just give our UI element a name, and then we have a CSS selector that will reference the element inside of our view. So UI.name will equal the element that has an ID of name, and then we want to get UI.age, which will be the element with an ID of age. Now, from within our create user function, we can call this .collection.add, and we're going to add an element here that's going to have a name of this.ui.name.val. That's going to be a jQuery object, and it's just a little bit of an easier way to reference it. Then we can have an age here, and that will be this.ui.age.val as well. Then underneath that, we'll say this.ui.age.val, and we'll pass it an empty string, and we will do the same thing for name, so that in both cases, the text boxes will be reset for the next one. Okay, well that is all the views that we need for our mini application here. Now we want to go back to that application object that we created up at the top here, the user tracker. What we're going to do is add some regions to our application to allow us to render our views inside of those regions. So we're going to get our user tracker application here, and we're going to call the add regions method. And this is really, really simple. We just give a name to the region, for example, form, and then we have a CSS selector string that references the region, and that's going to be form. Now that form is referencing this element right here that we're creating in our index.jade template. So as you might guess, the other one is going to be list, and that will be list. So now that we have these two regions, we can actually go ahead and render content in those regions. However, when do we want to render that content? Well, we want to do it when the app starts up. And we can do that by calling usertracker.addInitializer. We can add as many initializers as we want, and this is a function that will be run when the application is started up. So in here, we're going to set usertracker.users to be a new users collection, and then we can say usertracker.form, and this refers to the region that we just created up above this, usertracker.form.show, and we want to show a new form view, and as its collection, we want to pass it usertracker.users. Notice that we're not asking it to render the form, we're just passing it an instance of the form view, and the form.show method will take care of that for us. After that, we're going to go to usertracker.list, and in that, we want to show a new users view. And just as before, we'll pass it its collection as usertracker.users. Now, the only thing left to do is start the application. So right at the bottom here, we'll run usertracker.start. I'll go ahead and save that. Looks like my server is running, so I can open Google Chrome, go to localhost port 3000, and it looks like we have a bit of an error. Now, this is actually a really silly mistake, but it looks like on all of these, I got so wrapped up in telling you about these wonderful item views that I forgot to call .extend on all of them. Yes, I actually forgot that on every single one of them. All right, there we go. So just in case you were wondering, yes, there's nothing special about these item views in that they are still regular Backbone classes, and you do need to call .extend to create subclasses. So hopefully that was all, and it looks like that does solve all problems. So notice that currently, since there are no users in our collection, we have the text no users displayed down here. However, if I was to go ahead and add a name and an age, when I press create, notice that it is replaced by this content here. So this also shows you that there's some event workings going on underneath Marionette.js as well. We didn't ever have to tell it that when the collection was updated, go ahead and update the view. It just knows to do that automatically. So let's add another one here. We can add Jane and say her age is 25. And let's do one more, Sally, and we can say her age is 18. And as you can see, these would just continue to be appended to our element down here. So that's been a really quick look at Marionette.js. There's a lot more that you can do with Marionette.js. There's a collection of maybe 10 or 12 different classes that Marionette offers, and all of them are tuned to making large applications in Backbone much more manageable. I actually like Marionette.js quite a bit, much more than the Backbone layout manager that we used in the previous screencast. However, they're both comprehensive tools for making large Backbone applications a little bit easier to handle. So if you find yourself writing a large Backbone application, I think you owe it to yourself to check them out.